The massive conference room aboard the Federation flagship Unity had never hosted such a desperate gathering. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the holographic display table, their various forms of distress evident despite their alien features. The Xanthari's blue skin had turned pale gray. The Corvani's tentacles writhed nervously. Even the usually stoic Drakmari showed cracks in their stone-like composure. Ambassador Veltar of the Xanthari stood slowly, his 3 arms trembling as he activated the holographic display. The room filled with images of devastation that made even battle-hardened veterans look away. Entire planets stripped bare of life. Cities that had stood for millennia reduced to empty husks. Billions of lives snuffed out in mere weeks. The Kithra swarm has taken 12 core worlds in 6 months, Veltar announced, his voice barely above a whisper. Our projections show complete Federation collapse within the year if current trends continue. The room erupted in angry chittering, roars and electronic tones as each species voiced their frustration in their native language. General Thox of the Drakmari military slammed his massive fist on the table, cracking the metal surface. We have thrown everything at them, Thox growled. Our best fleets, our finest warriors, our most advanced weapons. Nothing stops them. They consume our forces and grow stronger. Admiral Kes Hari of the Aquatic Union's voice bubbled through her translation device. Perhaps we should consider evacuation protocols. Save what populations we can and retreat to the Outer Rim. Retreat where? Snapped Commander Zixal of the Insectoid Collective. They will follow. They always follow. The hive mind learns from every battle. It adapts. It grows. Veltar raised his primary arm for silence. The chatter died down as all eyes focused on him. There is one option we have not explored. One species we have not asked for help. The room fell completely silent. Every representative knew which species he meant, though none wanted to say it out loud. The humans of Earth had only joined the Federation 50 years ago, and their reputation preceded them. Stories of their violent history, their seemingly endless capacity for warfare, their strange honor codes that somehow coexisted with brutal efficiency. The humans, whispered Admiral Kes Hari. But they are so primitive, their weapons are crude. Their ships barely qualify for deep space travel. Their primitiveness may be exactly what we need, Veltar replied. We have fought the Kithra with honor, following the galactic conventions of warfare. Clean battles, minimal civilian casualties, respect for enemy dead. The humans do not share our refined approach to conflict. General Thox leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the table. You speak of hiring barbarians to fight our war. I speak of hiring soldiers, Veltar corrected. The humans understand duty. They understand sacrifice. Most importantly, they understand how to win against impossible odds. The debate that followed lasted 3 hours. Some representatives argued that bringing humans into the conflict would stain the Federation's reputation. Others pointed out that having a reputation would require surviving first. Eventually, a vote was called. The measure passed by a single vote. 3 days later, Ambassador Veltar found himself in the modest conference room of Earth's orbital station. The human facility looked almost quaint compared to Federation architecture. No flowing organic curves or crystal formations, just simple metal and glass, functional and efficient. General Sarah Chen entered the room with 2 aides. She was smaller than Veltar had expected, but something in her eyes made him take an involuntary step back. Those were the eyes of someone who had seen too much death and learned to sleep soundly anyway. Ambassador, General Chen said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. I understand you have a problem that needs solving. Veltar accepted the handshake, noting the surprising strength in her grip. The Federation faces extinction from an enemy unlike any we have encountered. We need soldiers. Disciplined troops who can follow orders and maintain formation against overwhelming odds. General Chen smiled, and somehow that expression made Veltar more nervous than angry Drakmari war cries. How many soldiers do you need? 50,000 would be acceptable. 100,000 would be ideal. And what exactly would these soldiers be fighting? Veltar activated his portable hologram projector. Images of the Kithra filled the air between them. Insectoid creatures the size of ground vehicles with razor-sharp claws and acid spit. Hive ships that could strip a planet bare in weeks. Swarm tactics that overwhelmed even the most prepared defenses. General Chen studied the images carefully, occasionally asking technical questions about Kithera capabilities and weaknesses. Her questions were sharp and precise, focusing on tactical details that even Federation military commanders sometimes overlooked. "They show no mercy to prisoners?" she asked. "None. Captured beings are processed into biofuel for the hive. They target civilians deliberately. Civilians are simply another resource to be harvested. And your current military doctrine?" Veltar hesitated. "We follow the Galactic Conventions. Honor in battle, protection of non-combatants, respect for enemy dead." General Chen's laugh was soft but somehow chilling. "You're trying to fight a genocidal hive mind with honor codes. It is how civilized species conduct warfare. Ambassador, let me be very clear about something. There is no such thing as civilized warfare when your enemy wants to eat your children." General Chen's voice remained calm, but her eyes had gone completely cold. "The Galactic Conventions work when both sides agree to follow them. Your enemy has already shown they consider your people to be food, not fellow sentients." Veltar shifted uncomfortably. The human's casual dismissal of millennia of galactic law unsettled him, even though her logic was sound. "Will Earth provide the soldiers we need?" he asked. General Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying the holographic images of devastation. "We'll provide military personnel. 50,000 to start, with the option to deploy more if needed." "Excellent. When can they be ready for deployment?" 2 weeks for final selection and transport. But I want one thing understood clearly." General Chen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You're not hiring soldiers, Ambassador. Soldiers follow rules. Soldiers fight with honor. Soldiers show mercy to defeated enemies." Veltar felt his skin growing paler by the second. "Then what are you sending us?" General Chen's smile returned, and this time it looked almost predatory. "We're sending you what soldiers become when civilization fails them. We're sending you what humans call killers." The contract was signed 30 minutes later. As Veltar prepared to leave, General Chen made one final comment that would haunt his dreams for years to come. "Ambassador, your people asked Earth for soldiers. I hope you survive what we're actually sending you." After the alien delegation departed, General Chen sat alone in her office, staring out at the stars. She had not lied to the ambassador. Earth would indeed provide military personnel, but the Federation had no idea what they had just unleashed upon the galaxy. She activated her secure communication system and began making calls to people whose names did not appear on any official military roster. People whose methods had been deemed too extreme for conventional warfare. People who had crossed lines that regular soldiers could not even see. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had never lost a species-wide conflict. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest or the most technologically advanced, but because when survival was at stake, humans were willing to become monsters to protect what they loved. And monsters, General Chen reflected, were exactly what this war needed. General Sarah Chen stood before a wall of monitors in the secure facility, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Nevada desert. Each screen showed a different file, a different face, a different history of violence that would make most people sick to their stomachs. These were not the kind of personnel files kept in normal military databases. "Project Reaper is a go," she announced to the dozen officers assembled in the briefing room. "We have 2 weeks to select and prepare 50,000 personnel for immediate deployment." Colonel Marcus Webb, the project's military psychologist, raised his hand. "General, I have to ask again. Are we sure about this approach? The Federation is expecting disciplined soldiers who follow orders and maintain unit cohesion." General Chen turned from the monitors to face him. "Colonel, tell me what you know about the Kythera." Webb consulted his tablet. "Insectoid hive mind species. Extremely aggressive. They consume organic matter to fuel their expansion. No known instances of mercy or negotiation. And how have traditional Federation forces performed against them? Poorly, very poorly. They've lost every major engagement in 6 months. Why?" Webb hesitated. "The Federation military follows strict codes of conduct. They try to minimize civilian casualties, respect enemy dead, follow rules of engagement. Against an enemy that views them as food," General Chen finished. "Colonel, the Federation asked for soldiers. But soldiers are bound by rules, by honor, by the idea that war has limits. What we're fighting doesn't recognize limits." She gestured to the monitors around them. "These people understand what the Federation doesn't. Sometimes you have to become the monster, to kill the monster. The selection process had begun 5 days earlier with a simple message, sent to every Black Ops unit, mercenary company, and maximum security prison on Earth and its colonies. The message was brief. Volunteer for off-world military deployment. High casualty rate expected. No questions asked about past service records. The response had been overwhelming. Thousands of applications from people the regular military would never touch. War criminals who had been quietly retired rather than prosecuted. Corporate assassins whose companies had disavowed them. Former child soldiers who had grown up in Earth's forgotten conflicts. Mercenaries who had been banned from most civilized worlds. Captain Lisa Rodriguez walked through the holding facility, where potential recruits waited for psychological evaluation. These were not the kind of people who stood at attention or saluted properly. They lounged against walls, played cards with makeshift decks, or simply stared at nothing with the 1,000-yard stare of people who had seen too much. In cell block A, she found James Morrison. His file made for disturbing reading. Former Special Forces operator turned serial killer. 37 confirmed kills of enemy combatants during his military service. 14 civilian murders after his discharge. He had been on death row when the recruitment message reached him. "Why do you want this assignment?" Rodriguez asked him. Morrison looked up from the book he was reading. Something about ancient military tactics. "Because I'm good at killing things, and apparently that's what you need." The mission could be suicide. "We don't know much about the enemy except that they're dangerous." Morrison smiled and Rodriguez felt her skin crawl. "Ma'am, I've been dead inside for years. Might as well make it useful." 3 cells down, she found Maria Vasquez, former colonel in a private military company that had been disbanded after allegations of genocide in the colonial wars. Vasquez had commanded forces that had systematically eliminated civilian populations suspected of supporting rebels. Her methods had been effective but had earned her a war crimes warrant from the International Criminal Court. "What makes you think you can handle an alien enemy?" Rodriguez asked. Vasquez looked up from the push-ups she had been doing. "Colonel, I've killed humans, which is the hardest thing to do because they think like I do. Killing bugs should be easier. These aren't just bugs. They're intelligent, organized. Then they can suffer like intelligent beings," Vasquez interrupted. "Fear is universal, Colonel. I know how to use it." The psychological evaluations were unlike anything the military had ever conducted. Instead of screening out violent tendencies, they were screening for specific types of violence. Dr. Webb had developed criteria that would have horrified civilian psychologists. "We're not looking for stability," he explained to his team. "We're looking for controlled instability. People who can turn their darkness on and off as needed. People who can commit atrocities without losing their tactical thinking." One of his assistants, Dr. Sarah Kim, looked disturbed. "Doctor, we're essentially recruiting functional psychopaths." "No," Webb corrected. "Psychopaths can't form unit bonds. They can't follow orders when it conflicts with their personal interests. We're recruiting people who have learned to weaponize their trauma, people who can work as a team while doing things that would break normal soldiers." The interviews continued around the clock. Each potential recruit was asked the same basic questions. Can you kill without hesitation? Can you follow orders that violate every convention of warfare? Can you work with people you don't trust to accomplish missions you might not survive? Most importantly, they were asked, when the mission is over, can you live with what you've done? The answers varied, but they all had a common theme. These were people who had already crossed lines that normal soldiers couldn't see. They had already learned to live with blood on their hands. In the medical wing, Dr. Elizabeth Harper oversaw the physical evaluations. Unlike normal military physicals, these focused on different criteria. Pain tolerance was more important than physical fitness. Reaction to stress was more important than strength. The ability to function while injured was more important than endurance. "We're not sending athletes," she explained to her staff. "We're sending survivors. People who can keep fighting when everything goes wrong." Many of the recruits showed signs of old injuries that would have disqualified them from regular military service. Bullet scars, knife wounds, broken bones that had healed wrong. But these same injuries told a story of people who had survived situations that would have killed others. One recruit, a former corporate enforcer named David Chen, had 17 separate scars from knife wounds. When asked about them during his physical, he simply said, "The other guys have more." As the selection process neared completion, General Chen reviewed the final list with her staff. 50,000 names. 50,000 people who had been rejected by civilized society for being too violent, too ruthless, too willing to cross moral lines. "Are we sure about this?" Colonel Webb asked one final time. Once we deploy these people, there's no controlling what they do. They'll represent humanity to an entire galaxy. General Chen looked at the reports from Federation space. Another world had fallen to the Kithera while they were making their selections. Millions more dead. The enemy was adapting to Federation tactics, growing stronger with each victory. Colonel, the Federation thinks they're hiring disciplined soldiers who will follow their rules of engagement. They think they're getting people who will fight with honor and mercy. She turned to face him. What they're actually getting are people who understand that honor and mercy are luxuries you can only afford when you're winning. She activated the communication system that would send deployment orders to each selected recruit. The galaxy asked for soldiers. We're sending them killers, and killers are exactly what this war needs. As the orders went out, General Chen allowed herself a moment of doubt. They were unleashing something dark upon the galaxy, something that might be impossible to control once the war was over. But the alternative was extinction, and humanity had never chosen extinction when they could choose to become monsters instead. The recruits began shipping out within 48 hours. 50,000 killers heading to Federation space, carrying with them all the darkness that humanity had learned to weaponize over centuries of warfare. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. The Federation transport ship Harmony shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace above. Kepler 442b, what should have been a thriving industrial world with 2 billion inhabitants, now looked like a corpse. The planet's surface was covered in the gray, web-like structures that marked Kithera occupation. Massive hive ships orbited the world like metal parasites, already beginning the harvest that would strip away all organic life. Colonel Maria Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the human transport attached to the Federation flagship. Around her, 50 other humans watched the devastation below with expressions that ranged from anger to anticipation. These were not the faces of soldiers preparing for a heroic battle. These were the faces of predators sizing up their prey. First time seeing them in action? Asked James Morrison, the former death row inmate who now served as her sergeant major. His voice carried a casual tone that seemed inappropriate given the billions of dead below them. First time seeing them at all, Vasquez replied. What do you think? Morrison studied the alien ships through the viewport. They're thorough, efficient, but they're thinking like a hive mind, not like individuals. That gives us advantages they won't expect. The Federation fleet hung in space around them, massive ships with elegant designs that spoke of centuries of peaceful exploration. Admiral Kesahari's voice came over the communication system, her words translated from her native Aquatic Union language. All ships, this is Fleet Command. Long-range sensors show significant Kithera presence on the surface. Intelligence reports indicate they have established processing centers in the major population areas. Current rules of engagement are in effect. Minimize civilian casualties and respect surrender protocols. Vasquez activated her unit's private communication channel. You heard the Admiral, people. Rules of engagement are in effect. She paused, and her smile was visible even through her helmet's visor. Too bad the bugs don't seem to know about surrender protocols. The human ships detached from the Federation fleet and began their descent toward the planet's surface. Unlike the careful, measured approach of their alien allies, the human vessels moved with aggressive purpose, diving toward the heaviest concentrations of enemy forces. The city of New Geneva had been home to 8 million people 3 weeks ago. Now it was a sprawling mass of organic architecture that pulsed with alien life. Kithera workers the size of ground vehicles moved through the streets, systematically stripping buildings of any useful material. Larger warrior forms patrolled the perimeter, their razor-sharp claws clicking against the pavement. At the city's center, the humans found something that made even hardened killers pause. A processing facility where captured civilians were being converted into biofuel for the hive ships. The screams were audible even through the environmental suits. Command, this is Ground Team Alpha. Vasquez spoke into her communicator. We have visual confirmation of ongoing civilian processing. Requesting permission to engage. The response came from Admiral Kesashari herself. Negative, Ground Team Alpha. Intelligence indicates the facility is too heavily defended. Pull back and await reinforcements. Vasquez looked at her squad. 50 humans, all of whom had volunteered for what amounted to a suicide mission. In any sane military, the Admiral's order made perfect sense. The facility was defended by hundreds of Kithera warriors. A frontal assault would be massacre. But these were not sane soldiers. "Morrison," she called to her sergeant major. "What's your assessment?" Morrison was studying the facility through his rifle scope. Defense pattern is designed to repel conventional assault. They're expecting enemies who follow standard tactics. He lowered his weapon and grinned. "Good thing we're not standard." Vasquez made a decision that would change the course of the war. "All units disregard Federation command. We're going in." The assault began not with the systematic advance that Federation forces would have used, but with something the Cathara had never encountered: psychological warfare on a scale they couldn't comprehend. The humans didn't just attack the outer defenses, they attacked the dead. Morrison's squad systematically dismembered fallen Kithra warriors and used their body parts as improvised weapons. The sight of their own dead being defiled in ways the hive mind couldn't process sent ripples of something unprecedented through the collective consciousness: fear. Vasquez led her team through the processing facility with tactics that violated every convention of civilized warfare. When they found Cathara workers torturing civilians, they didn't simply kill the aliens. They made sure the deaths were slow, painful, and visible to other members of the hive. "They can feel each other's pain," explained Dr. Sarah Kim, the psychologist who had helped select the human forces over the communication channel. "The hive mind experiences every death, make them memorable." The humans did exactly that. They turned the Cathara's greatest strength into a weakness. Every brutal execution, every creative torture, every violation of what the aliens considered natural behavior was transmitted instantly to the entire hive network. For the first time in their species' history, the Cathara began to retreat not because of tactical disadvantage, but because of terror. Federation command watched the human assault in growing horror. The tactical displays showed impossible progress as human forces carved through defenses that had stopped entire Federation fleets. But the method of that progress violated everything they believed about civilized warfare. "Are they actually using enemy corpses as weapons?" asked General Thox, his stone-like features showing unprecedented disgust. "And as psychological tools," confirmed Admiral Kesahari. "They're deliberately maximizing the suffering of enemy casualties to terrorize the hive mind." "It's working," observed Ambassador Veltar quietly. "Look at the tactical display. Kithra forces are abandoning prepared positions. They're retreating from areas they've held for weeks." The breakthrough came when Morrison's squad reached the core of the processing facility. Instead of simply destroying the machinery, they reprogrammed it. The same systems that had been converting civilians into biofuel were now broadcasting the screams of dying Kithra throughout the hive network. The psychological impact was devastating. The hive mind, which had never experienced fear or trauma, was suddenly flooded with both. Kithara forces across the entire planet began abandoning their positions, not from tactical necessity but from something approaching panic. Within 6 hours, New Geneva was free. The cost had been minimal by human standards, only 12 casualties. But the method of victory had changed everything. As human forces regrouped in the city center, Federation observers began arriving to assess the situation. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. The humans had not just defeated the Cathara, they had broken them. Captured enemy communications showed unprecedented levels of distress throughout the hive network. For the first time since the war began, Cathara forces were showing something resembling psychological damage. "How?" Ambassador Veltar asked Vasquez as they stood amid the ruins of the processing facility. "How did you achieve this?" Vasquez looked at the alien diplomat with tired eyes. "You asked for soldiers, Ambassador. Soldiers fight by rules. Soldiers show mercy to defeated enemies. Soldiers try to minimize suffering." She gestured to the battlefield around them, where human teams were systematically documenting Cathara capabilities, while simultaneously creating displays designed to terrorize any returning enemy forces. "We're not soldiers. We're what humans become when the rules don't matter anymore. We're what your civilized warfare looks like when it meets an enemy that wants to eat your children." As Federation forces began arriving to secure the area, reports were already coming in from other human deployments across the galaxy. Everywhere the humans fought, the Cathara were not just losing, they were fleeing. The hive mind that had conquered 12 Federation worlds in 6 months was experiencing something it had never known: the fear of becoming prey. Admiral Kesahari's final report to Federation Command was brief but telling. "The humans have achieved the impossible. They have made the Cathara afraid. but I fear we may have traded one monster for another. The war was turning, but the galaxy was beginning to understand that their salvation might come at a price they weren't prepared to pay. The Kythera queen mind had existed for over 10,000 years, leading her species through countless conquests across the galaxy. She had consumed entire civilizations, absorbed the knowledge of hundreds of species, and never once experienced what lesser beings called fear. That changed the day her hive network began screaming. Deep within the primary hive ship, a massive biological construct that served as both vessel and living creature, the queen mind struggled to process the reports flooding through her consciousness. Her children were dying, not just from enemy weapons but from something far worse: terror. The humans had done more than defeat Kythera forces. They had introduced concepts that the hive mind was not equipped to handle: pain without purpose, death without meaning, brutality that served no biological function except to cause suffering. For the first time in her species' history, the queen mind made a decision born not from logical analysis but from emotional response. She ordered a full retreat from human-occupied territories. Captain James Morrison stood in the command center of the captured Kythera outpost on Rigel 7, watching the alien withdrawal with professional satisfaction. Around him, his team was preparing for their next mission while Federation observers tried to understand what they were witnessing. "They're not just retreating," reported Lieutenant Sarah Park, a former corporate assassin who had volunteered for the suicide mission. "Long-range sensors show they're abandoning positions they've held for months, even areas where they have overwhelming tactical advantage." Morrison nodded as he studied the tactical displays. Fear is spreading through their hive network faster than their command structure can adapt. They're discovering that shared consciousness has disadvantages when what you're sharing is trauma. Admiral Keshari's voice crackled through the communication system from the Federation flagship in orbit. "Human forces, this is Fleet Command. Our intelligence division is receiving unprecedented communications from Kythera networks. They appear to be requesting negotiation." Morrison's laugh was cold and humorless. "No negotiations, Admiral. They had their chance to show mercy when they were processing civilians into fuel. Now they get to learn what it feels like to be prey." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent report from one of Morrison's scouts. "Captain, we've got movement in Sector 7. Large Kythera force, but they're not advancing. They're digging in?" Morrison studied the tactical display, noting the unusual defensive pattern. "They're not trying to hold territory. They're trying to create a barrier between us and something else." His eyes narrowed as the implications became clear. They're protecting something important. The target turned out to be a massive hive ship hidden in the asteroid field at the edge of the system. Unlike the mobile command vessels they had encountered before, this one was different. Larger, more complex, and radiating the kind of bioenergy signatures that suggested it housed something vital to the Kythera command structure. "That's their local queen node," confirmed Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the xenobiologist attached to Morrison's unit. "If we can capture it alive, we'll have access to their entire hive network for this sector." Federation Command was skeptical. "Captain Morrison, capturing a queen node has never been attempted. Our intelligence suggests it would be impossible." Morrison was already planning the assault. "Admiral, with respect, your intelligence is based on conventional tactics. We don't use conventional tactics." The mission briefing Morrison gave to his assembled teams became legend among human forces. Standing before 200 of the most dangerous individuals Earth had ever produced, he laid out a plan that would have been rejected by any sane military command. "Listen up, people. We're going to do something that's never been done before. We're going to capture a Kythera queen node alive." He gestured to the holographic display showing the target ship. "This thing is surrounded by approximately 50,000 Kythera warriors, all of whom would rather die than let us reach their queen." The assembled killers listened, with the calm attention of professionals being given technical specifications for a difficult job. "The good news," Morrison continued, "is that they're thinking like a hive mind. They'll try to protect the queen by creating layers of defense. They'll expect us to fight through those defenses systematically." He smiled, and the expression made even hardened criminals uncomfortable. "The bad news for them is that we're not going to fight through the defenses. We're going to make the defenses irrelevant." The assault began with Morrison's teams doing something the Kythera couldn't predict. They surrendered, 50 humans and damaged equipment, and fake wounds allowed themselves to be captured by Kythera patrols. The aliens, following their standard protocol, transported the prisoners to the hive ship for processing into biofuel. What the Kythera didn't realize was that humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of deception. The damaged equipment included weapons designed to look broken but function perfectly. The wounds were makeup and fake blood applied by people who had learned to survive by lying convincingly. Once inside the hive ship, the humans did what they did best. They became monsters. The Kythera had never encountered enemies who could function independently while surrounded by hostile forces. Their entire defensive strategy was based on the assumption that invaders would try to fight their way to objectives. They had no protocols for dealing with enemies who were already inside, pretending to be helpless prisoners. Morrison's team systematically destroyed the ship's internal defenses while moving toward the Queen Node chamber. But they didn't just disable security systems, they reprogrammed them. Every security camera became a broadcasting station. Every internal communication channel became a psychological warfare tool. The Queen Node found herself watching in real time as humans methodically dismantled her defenses while using her own ship's systems to broadcast the destruction to the entire hive network. For the first time in her existence, she experienced something approaching panic. The final confrontation took place in the bio-neural chamber at the heart of the hive ship. The Queen Node, a massive creature that was part insect, part machine, and part living computer, faced Morrison and his team with defensive measures that had protected her for centuries. Those measures proved useless against humans who fought without honor, mercy, or regard for their own survival. The capture itself was surprisingly simple. The Queen Node's defenses were designed to repel invaders who wanted to destroy her. They were not designed to handle enemies who wanted to keep her alive for interrogation. As Morrison's team secured the chamber, the psychological impact of their success rippled through the Kythera hive network. A Queen Node had been captured alive. The impossible had happened. The interrogation that followed revealed the full scope of what the humans had accomplished. The Queen Node, connected to her network but unable to break free from human control, was forced to experience her species' terror in real time. "You have done something unprecedented," she communicated through the translation devices. "You have made my children afraid to fight." They who have known only victory now know defeat. They who have consumed countless species now fear being consumed. Morrison studied the alien queen with the same cold professionalism he had once applied to human targets. "Your children should be afraid. Fear keeps them alive. You forgot that other species can learn to hunt too." The Queen Node's final transmission before Morrison's team severed her connection to the network carried a message that would change the course of the war. Retreat from all human territories. These beings are not soldiers. They are something far more dangerous. They are what we could become if we lost our unity. As Federation forces arrived to secure the captured hive ship, they found Morrison's teams already preparing for their next mission. The humans had not just captured a Queen Node, they had demonstrated that the Kythera were not invincible. More importantly, they had proven that fear was a weapon that cut both ways. The war was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted. The galaxy's greatest predators had discovered that sometimes the prey learns to bite back. The war ended not with a grand final battle, but with silence. The Kythera swarm's withdrawal from Federation space happened over the course of 3 weeks. Massive hive ships that had dominated star systems for months simply departed, heading for the empty regions beyond the galactic rim. No ultimatums were delivered. No final messages were sent. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known simply left. General Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the Federation flagship Unity, watching the last Kythera vessel disappear into hyperspace. Around her, alien diplomats and military officers celebrated the end of the war. But Chen felt no joy, only a growing sense of unease about what came next. "They're really gone," said Ambassador Veltar, his blue skin returning to its normal color for the first time in months. "Our long-range sensors confirm it. All Kythera forces have withdrawn beyond the galactic boundary." "Why?" asked Admiral Kesahari. "They were winning before the humans arrived. They had superior numbers, established positions, resource advantage. What changed?" Chen knew the answer, but she wasn't sure the Federation was ready to hear it. The humans hadn't just defeated the Kythera through superior tactics or weapons. They had broken them psychologically, introduced concepts of terror and helplessness that the hive mind couldn't process. The final transmission from the Kithara Queen mind had been brief but telling. We withdraw not from tactical defeat, but from recognition of a greater predator. The humans are not prey. They are what we could become without unity. We will not return while they guard this galaxy. The celebration was interrupted by an urgent communication from Colonel Maria Vasquez, who was leading human forces in the cleanup operations on reclaimed worlds. Her image appeared on the main screen, and Chen immediately noticed the subtle changes in her expression. The same cold professionalism was there, but something else had been added. Something hungry. General Chen, we need to discuss the post-war situation, Vasquez said without preamble. My units have completed securing the former Kithara territories, but we have a problem. What kind of problem, Colonel? The kind where 50,000 battle-tested killers don't want to go home. The briefing that followed took place in a secure chamber, deep within the Federation flagship. Present were General Chen, the senior Federation military leadership, and Ambassador Veltar. What they learned made everyone except Chen deeply uncomfortable. The human forces had not simply liberated worlds from Kithara occupation. They had established what they called security zones, territories under direct human control, administered according to human military law rather than Federation civilian authority. They're not following Federation protocols for liberated territories, explained Admiral Kesahari. They've set up their own command structures, their own supply lines, their own judicial systems. General Chen had expected this. People like Morrison and Vasquez weren't the type to simply pack up and go home after tasting the freedom of unlimited warfare. They had found something in the war against the Kithara that normal society couldn't provide. A place where their particular skills were not just useful, but essential. What exactly are they doing in these security zones? Veltar asked. The answer came from intercepted human communications, translated and analyzed by Federation intelligence. What they revealed painted a picture of human-controlled space that operated by very different rules than the rest of the galaxy. Trade disputes were settled by combat trials. Petty criminals faced punishments that Federation law would consider torture. Interspecies conflicts were resolved through methods that prioritized efficiency over justice. The humans had created pocket dictatorships run by people who understood only one form of governance. Might makes right. They're effective, admitted General Thox grudgingly. Crime rates in human-controlled areas have dropped to near zero. Trade flows have been restored faster than in any Federation-liberated territory. They've established order. What kind of order? Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. The kind that comes from everyone being afraid to break the rules. The situation came to a head when Morrison's forces encountered a group of civilian refugees trying to cross from Federation space into a human security zone. The refugees were families fleeing economic hardship in the post-war chaos, hoping to find stability in the human-controlled territories. Morrison's response was typically direct. He accepted the refugees, but under conditions that made Federation observers deeply uncomfortable. Anyone entering human territory would follow human law. Anyone committing crimes would face human justice. Anyone threatening the security of the zone would disappear. The message was clear. The humans were no longer taking orders from the Federation. They had tasted independence and found they preferred it to civilian oversight. The crisis escalated when Ambassador Veltar received a formal communication from the Federation Council on the homeworld. The content was brief but shocking. They wanted to hire the humans. Permanently, the Council has reviewed the performance of human forces during the Kithara conflict. Veltar explained to General Chen. They're offering a contract for long-term peace enforcement services throughout Federation space. Chen studied the contract terms with growing alarm. The Federation wanted to essentially institutionalize what the humans had already created, zones of military control administered by people who operated outside normal legal constraints. They want to hire us as their attack dogs, she said finally. Keep the really dangerous humans busy fighting their enemies instead of creating problems for them. It's a generous offer, Veltar pointed out. Significant monetary compensation, autonomous operational authority, official Federation backing. It's a leash, Chen corrected. A very expensive leash. The decision about how to respond came from an unexpected source: Earth's civilian government. When news of the Federation's offer reached home, the response was swift and unambiguous. The message from Earth's Prime Minister was delivered personally by General Chen to a gathering of all human unit commanders in Federation space. Standing before 200 of the most dangerous individuals humanity had ever produced, she read the official response. The United Earth Government recognizes the extraordinary service of all personnel involved in the Kythera conflict. However, we cannot officially sanction the establishment of permanent human military zones within Federation space. All personnel are ordered to return to Earth for debriefing and reassignment within 90 days. The silence that followed the announcement was deafening. Then Morrison started laughing. A slow, dark sound that was soon joined by others until the entire room filled with the laughter of people who found the situation genuinely amusing. Ordered to return, Vasquez said when the laughter died down, by people who have never seen real war. By politicians who still believe that monsters can be house-trained. Chen had expected this response, but hearing it still chilled her. The offer stands, she said. Transport home, full pardons for any irregularities during the war, and reassignment to conventional military units. Morrison stood up slowly, his movement drawing the attention of everyone in the room. General, with all due respect to Earth Command, we're not conventional military units anymore. We're not even really human anymore, not in the way civilians understand humanity. He gestured to the assembled personnel. Look around this room. Do you see anyone who could go back to a normal life? Could Vasquez work in an office building? Could Park teach children? Could any of us pretend that we haven't learned what we're really capable of? Chen realized with growing horror that Morrison was right. The people in this room had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. They had become something that civilian society couldn't absorb, couldn't control, and couldn't trust. So what happens now? She asked. Morrison's smile was the same predatory expression that had terrified Kythera hive minds. Now we become what we were always meant to be. The things that hunt in the dark, so others can sleep safely. The final chapter of the Kythera War was written not by diplomats or historians, but by intelligence analysts tracking human movements throughout Federation space. The 50,000 humans didn't return to Earth. They didn't accept Federation employment. They simply scattered. Some established themselves as private military contractors, selling their services to worlds that needed problems solved quietly. Others became advisors to governments facing threats that conventional forces couldn't handle. A few disappeared entirely, becoming legends whispered about in the darkest corners of civilized space. General Chen returned to Earth alone, carrying with her the terrible knowledge of what humanity had unleashed upon the galaxy. Her final report to Earth Command was classified at the highest levels, but one sentence summarized everything. We sent killers to save the galaxy. They succeeded. God help us all. The galaxy was safer now. The Kythera were gone, and other potential threats had learned that some prey was too dangerous to hunt. But the price of that safety was the knowledge that humanity's monsters were still out there, watching from the shadows, waiting for the next war that would need their particular talents. In the end, the Federation had asked Earth for soldiers, and Earth had sent exactly what they needed. People willing to become monsters so others didn't have to.